On December 20th, 2020, at the end of their disappointing final performance at the IEM Global Challenge, Twistzz, star rifler and longtime member of Team Liquid, after their 0-3 defeat at the hands of Astralis, announced publicly and for the first time that he was deciding to step down from Team Liquid and would be leaving the team soon thereafter. This was kind of a major shock to everybody. We all know that he hadn't been playing as well recently in the months leading up to this date, but there were no rumors that he was expected to leave. Nobody was talking about it. His name hadn't come up in any kind of trades or transfers. This kind of seemed to come out of left field for a lot of us because while he has certainly been disappointing, especially over the COVID era, I still think he has a lot to offer Counter-Strike. I mean, he's one of the most naturally gifted Counter-Strike players that I've ever seen just in terms of raw mechanics. You could put this guy's just raw aim skill up against anybody in the world, and I mean anybody. I'm talking Prime Kenny S, I'm talking Prime Simple, Zaiwu, who still looks like he's got room to get better. Twistzz is just that good. And so for those reasons, I've decided to make a video where I kind of detail all the potential landing spots that he could possibly go to, because he did mention that he would likely be joining an EU team. So I've put a list together of a couple of the candidates and what my thoughts would be on any of those potential moves. First up, we have Mousesports. Now, my current thoughts on Mouse are definitely more critical than anything else. I mean, this is a team that under Kerrigan kind of reached spectacular heights considering kind of the team buildup in the players and what you would expect out of them. I mean, this is at a time when Mouse for years and years was called budget FaZe. There was a time not too long ago when FaZe were saying it's expensive Mouse because Kerrigan had this team functioning probably way above their level. You know, taking guys like Frozen, who's a young player, who's shown a lot of potential, refined Rop's game, getting that little bit more out of Chris J because he's been around the scene forever and he's been in this team for probably too long, and he might not be able to cut it as an opper, but Kerrigan's been able to get a lot out of him. And in the same sense, there's lots of rumors right now that Kerrigan could be leaving this Mouse team and kind of pursuing other options. So this Mouse team is in a bit of a limbo, and I think that adding Twistzz would likely be an upgrade. But with every player adding a player, that means you have to remove a player. So let's go over the likely moves. The first one, as I just mentioned, is Kerrigan. Like I said, this is based on hearsay and rumor and things that are likely to happen within the scene, because there's been enough reporting that I would say it's probably likely that Kerrigan is on the way out. But then again, maybe Twistzz entering the transfer portal and maybe Mousesports being able to pick him up, maybe that would change Kerrigan's mind so they'd have to look somewhere else. But for the meantime, let's imagine a world in which this Mousesports team gets rid of Kerrigan and adds Twistzz. I mean, the first thing that you'd have to say is, once again, you would completely lack an IGL on this team. And it's not that this team doesn't have skill, it's just that the strength of Kerrigan is so great at getting that little bit more, that 5 to 10% more out of every single one of his players. He can take one of those marginal guys and make him look solid, one of those solid guys and make him look good, and a good player look great. That's kind of the strength of Kerrigan. And I feel like if Mouse loses Kerrigan but picks up Twistzz, I don't feel like they're going to get all that much better. In fact, I think they could actually get worse. Maybe not what they've been doing over the whole of the COVID era, but once we get back to more LAN environments, they could probably get worse than where they were at LAN in 2019. For the simple reason that I think Chris J probably needs to go. He's been, as a primary opper, I think especially over the last year, he's been terrible. I don't really know what else to say. I think that Rops's game has been affected too. I still think that Rops is a very good player. And I also think that Frozen's a great player too. But like I said, it's amazing how all of these guys, the second Kerrigan joined, got better, got noticeably better, got a little bit more out of their game. And I kind of think that If Kerrigan goes, those guys lose that game. So now you're taking Twistzz, taking him out of his home country into a mixed team, a team that has players from all different countries. Most of them are speaking English as a second language. I think you would put incredible burden on Twistzz to carry all the time. And that's a burden he's never really had before, because almost all the teams that he's been in, I mean, sure, he's been one of the best players on every team he's been in, but he's never been expected to be the primary carry of the team. And that's what I would afraid he would kind of end up with if they lose Kerrigan, is he would shoulder the blame of most of the frags that would need to happen on that team. And that's to say nothing of who do you have become IGL. Do you have Chris J do it because he's the oldest player on the team and he probably has the most experience? Maybe. Do you have Rops do it? He's the lurker. IGLs like to play the lurk position because they can get more information on the map, but he's never done it before. Again, with the Kerrigan move, there's a lot more questions than answers, which is why I wouldn't like to see that happen, but it's definitely a possibility. Another likely move Mouse could do is, like I said, the removal of Chris J. I brought it up before. I think Chris J's performance over the course of 2020 has been nothing more than unacceptable. I think if you looked at what he's done with the op, it is short of just running mid and trying an aggressive push and feeding the op to the other team, he's been just as bad. I mean, if you go and look at his demos, he's whiffing shots all over the place that he shouldn't miss. And I know he's got a slight uptick as of late, but it almost seems like it's too little too late, because if you look at the totality of what he's done recently, it's just not acceptable. So like I say, if you can convince Chris J to leave and Kerrigan to stay, or you just bench Chris J and say, hey, you're not playing good enough to warrant us keeping you on the team, now we might be talking here, because Kerrigan gets a little bit more life into this team. He gets another guy into that team that has a lot of upside, but maybe is still a little raw. And that's one thing that I would say about Twistzz is that, like I said before, his mechanical skill is great, but he's never really worked under a true world-class in-game leader. And I do think some of the kind of nuances, those skills that don't just come from being able to click on heads, I think he still has a little bit of that to learn. And I think Kerrigan would be a perfect person to work under, because Kerrigan has not only been the world-class IGL, but he was a star player in earlier versions of Counter-Strike. So he's essentially been where Twistzz has been, and he knows how to use Twistzz. This is a lineup that I would really like, even though they completely lack an AWPer. I mean, Twistzz himself could maybe do it as a secondary guy. Maybe Bymass is young enough that you could teach him to do it and have him do it effectively. Maybe just cover up the AWP. You know, maybe you make it like a 2019 Liquid where it's mostly Nitro doing it, but other guys, and it can rotate. And, you know, sometimes Naf picks it up when he's feeling good about it, and Stewie can pick it up when he feels good about it. You know, maybe they have a kind of rotational op setup. And I think that even considering that little caveat of there's no real AWPer, I think that team could do well. Another possible move, and this is just purely hypothetical, is minus Frozen. I can understand why if you or Mouse, you wouldn't want to do this, because Frozen is a young player. He's still kind of learning the ropes, and this is his first big break. The reason why I call this a possible move and not a likely move is I don't know why you'd want to kick him. You probably wouldn't. He probably doesn't command as much money as Twistzz will in the open market. The only reason I call that possible is because I think Twistzz could slot into some of Frozen's roles. Not all. Frozen plays more of a supportive, more of a number 2 type position, but I think that Twistzz could fit into his positions really well. And I think that would give Mouse a little bit of a boost, but not as much as if they are able to keep Kerrigan and get Twistzz on the team. I just thought I'd throw that out there, because the problem with Mouse in general is all of their players are good to really good, but none of them are great. There isn't that one guy that you can say, hey, carry us right now. Or you have that guy where you can go, hey, we need to get 2 kills or 3 kills to hold this bomb site, to win this round, or to stop whatever aggression that those T's are showing, or to end a streak that they have. I don't really see that they have the guy that can consistently do that, and that's the reason why I throw that minus Frozen move on there, is because you're removing, again, one of those good guys, solid piece on a different team, and you're replacing him with a guy that can be the number one, your carry, your anchor with a bullet. So that's why I included that on there. And that's all I have to say about Mousesports. Next team I have is OG. This is something that people within the community are already speculating on. This OG team, unlike Mouse, who Mouse kind of seem like they're over the hill and their best days are behind them. OG, on the other hand, has gotten a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better at each tournament. And that's not to say that they've made it yet. In fact, I would say that they have not made it yet. And that's exactly why OG could look to make a move like this, is they're hovering right where they're ready to break into the top 10, and not just break into the top 10, but like be competitive against the best teams in the world. And it seems like they're poised to all the time, and they lose all of these close maps against all of these great teams. You know, they got second place at Flashpoint recently against VP, who were just on a roll at that tournament. And this is after coming all the way through the lower bracket and beating all of those other teams like Big. They beat Envy in there. They beat a lot of different teams in that lower bracket. But like I said, it's just like they've kind of hit a ceiling, it feels like, and they might get a little bit better, but it really feels like this team still has places to go, but this 5-man might not be the way to do it. So, possible moves. The one I have here is minus Montu. And this kind of feels bad for me to say, because I want to see young players being brought up in Counter-Strike. I want to see teams take chances on these young guys and try to teach them and get to work with people. I think it's no coincidence that this team, even though you had a lot of young players and guys from different regions coming together, the fact that you've got Alexi B is kind of the glue that holds this entire team together. Because even though he's calling in a second language, and even though I don't think his calls have been quite as on point and crisp and thought out as they were when he was leading that ENCE team to all those tournament wins and getting second place at the major and coming from nowhere and bringing a country in Finland back to relevance in the Counter-Strike scene the way that they haven't seen in years. It's not quite been that. And again, because I think these guys are speaking in a second language. They got some young players that they're trying to bring up. And because he probably is rebuilding an entire system from scratch. And so the reason why I still say Montu would be an obvious drop is because Twistzz, he swaps right into almost all the roles that Montu wants to play. He's an immediate firepower upgrade. And one key component, and I'm going to talk about this later, is because Twistzz speaks English as his first language, I actually think that could help Alexi B quite a bit. Because one of the things with these European mixed teams is these guys that are all speaking in a second language, some things can get lost in translation. That's just going to happen with these teams. And having a guy who's a native English speaker who can figure out the way that these guys speak in their non-native language, I think that could do wonders for communication. Now, this is also under the assumption that Twistzz can kind of figure out his own communication issues. And that's not to say that he had any in Liquid. But one of my biggest criticisms of Liquid is not just that they never had a real IGL. It never seemed to me like they were calming the way that they should. So unfortunately, I think like Stewie, especially in the last year, was kind of set up to fail. Because, you know, Lige is a very smart guy, but I also think that he's kind of wrapped up in his own world. You know, the memes about Naf being a sloth, not really talking, are probably true, because when you just look at his player cam, it just doesn't seem like he's ever talking all that much, and it could just be my perception that's wrong. And Twistzz is the same way. He seems like a guy that's more focused on getting his frags and getting his spots and getting set up and things like this, that they kind of miss that crisp communication. So that if it is something where I'm wrong, and I'd love to be proven wrong on this topic, and Twistzz is the guy that can fix those communication issues, I think that this OG team could not just take another step, they could take a huge step forward and they could be getting even better. And like I brought up with Kerrigan before, I think Twistzz working with a real IGL with real tactics and a guy that's been around the block like NBK, who's won a major, who's won lots of tournaments. He's played with all of these other star players. He's played with Shocks and Kenny S and others, and other big ego guys that needed to be pushed to, play the game more every once in a while. I think he could be great for Twistzz as well. It's just unfortunate that OG would have to kind of miss an up-and-coming player in Montu, but I think that would be the best move for them going forward. The third team I have on this list is FaZe Clan. Now, the FaZe Clan one is interesting for a few reasons, because the rumor is that Kerrigan, as I said before, when he leaves Mousesports, wants to join FaZe Clan. Olaf, legendary player, one of the greatest to ever do it. Loved watching him in his prime, but the simple fact of the matter is I don't think he can cut it in Tier 1 anymore. And I think he even knows that himself, which is why before FaZe lost Nico, he was the one that was slotted in. And it seemed like, for what he was all right. He's playing the more supportive roles, probably coming in as a veteran presence, kind of working with Cold Zero a bit, getting him integrated, maybe getting him up to speed on what it takes to be a top tier shot caller, IGL. But realistically, I don't think he can cut it anymore. I don't think he should try to cut it anymore. And this FaZe Clan team would probably be better off without him. So obviously the possible moves, as I was just talking about, was Olaf. Can't really cut it anymore. Unfortunately, that means that Twistzz would either be expected to slid into more of a supportive role, like Olaf was occupying through most of his time, or he would have to knock a guy like Brokey down to a more supportive role so he could take up that mantle himself. Now, this does leave a few questions for this FaZe Clan team, such as who's going to be the AWPer? Who's going to be the IGL? Because Cold is doing it, but that doesn't mean he's doing a good job. Brokey is an AWPer, but I don't think he's fully comfortable on that, and I think that he's better as a secondary AWPer anyway. Maybe you'd have to make him the full-time AWPer, maybe try to go without one. It's just that this FaZe Clan team, even if Twistzz decided to join it, there'd be a lot more questions than answers, I think. And I don't know if this FaZe team with Twistzz, I don't know if they get any better, because you're essentially replacing a problem, a guy who can't frag in Olaf with a guy who can frag, but you haven't fixed anything else. You haven't fixed the team chemistry issues that have always come up with this FaZe team. You haven't fixed the IGL issues, which have been there since Kerrigan left. It's just, I see this as a possibility because FaZe has a lot of money to throw around, but I just don't know how this could work realistically, and maybe FaZe would get a little bit of a bump in their overall level, but realistically, I think they probably fall right back to where they are right now pretty quickly, which is they're a puggy type team. They can pull an upset every once in a while, but they're not really going to be expected to win many tournaments. Another option I have is G2. Now, this G2 team is hypothetical, we'll say, but then again, all of these are hypotheticals. I'm just kind of going over the teams that might be interested in him. With all due respect to that 2017 FaZe, if Twistzz were to join this G2 team, absent that they don't lose Kenny S and Nico, I think this would be the most mechanically skilled team Counter-Strike Global Offensive has ever seen before. And that I think I could say that pretty confidently. Now, that's not to say that they're going to be a good team or that they would fit together or that there wouldn't be all kinds of other issues with that team. But just in terms of raw mechanics, I think this team would eclipse the 2017 FaZe Clan team if Kenny S can get back into form. Because we've all seen what Kenny S can do when he is putting in the hours and he's playing well and he's feeling the game. He can be the best player in the world. Nico, we know that he can be the best player. He can be the best player in the world on bad teams. Just go look at the Nico when he was on the Mousesports teams, the Nico Sports teams. He was carrying that team. I mean, he was in consideration for best player in the world when he was lucky to get out of groups at tournaments. That's how good this guy was. And then you got Twistzz, one of the all-time great aimers of this game. I'm going to say it again. Twistzz, with his raw mechanical skill, could absolutely be a top 3 player in the world in a month from now if he really put his head down, put in the hours, and learned the game more than just the level of being able to click on somebody's head pretty fast. And then you add into that Hunter, who's been another prodigy. I mean, I know it started out as Hunter is just Nico's cousin, but I think this guy's legitimately made a name for himself as an up-and-coming star. I would like to see Hunter away from Nico at some point in time, because I think this guy could stand on his own 2 feet as a genuine carry of a team. Another reason as to why this would be kind of a tantalizing move is that G2, the org, is excellent at integrating star players into the team. And this is just going to be kind of a side tangent, is if you look at G2's League of Legends team, their League of Legends team is a true super team. I mean, they are probably the best example of a super team that has ever existed in the entire world. The reason being is because before these guys joined G2, the vast majority of them were already superstars. Wunder was already the best top laner in Europe, maybe even probably the best top laner in the West. Caps, although he had his problems, showed immense potential. He showed the kind of talent where he couldn't just be the best, one of the best mid laners in Europe, but the best mid laner in the entire world. They managed to get Mickey Exon, who was this young, aggressive star support. And they got to Jankos too, one of the best junglers. So G2 took all of these players that were star players in their roles, got them into the team, and got them to work together. The simple fact of the matter is that almost never happens in any game. Not Counter-Strike, not League of Legends. The fact that G2 managed to do it in that team is incredible. And I think that they would take that same mentality, bringing in a guy like Twistzz, bringing in Nico, is that they're going to be able to teach these guys how to play together, teach these guys how to play as a team. And that would be something that I would really look forward to if I was a G2 fan, because I already know that they know what to do with star players. So that would be my rant for why in a purely hypothetical world, G2 could look to get Twistzz. This is where it gets a little bit more difficult, because this G2 team already kind of has a lot of their roles figured out. And the only person I can really see getting removed is Amanek. And again, this is one of those, boy, that's a really hard cut. And it's not because Amanek is some great player. I don't really think he is. But I think that Amanek is a great player at his position. I think that on this G2 team, he's done such a great job of setting up Kenny S and setting up Hunter. And I think he'll get to a place where he can set up Nico as well once they've been bedded in and once they played a lot more games together. He's basically done everything that's been asked of him and done it with flying colors, in my opinion. So it would feel really bad to get rid of Almanac. And the other issue with that move is, who's the support there? I mean, you can't just have 5 people with rifles all flashing for each other. You need a guy to throw a flashbang grenade for somebody else, or to throw a molly so that it flushes the player out so the other guy can get him. And Twistzz would almost unfortunately kind of have to be into that more number 2, that supportive role, that kind of point guard role, as it were, where you're setting up, where you're doing all this work to set somebody else up. You know, taking the bad aim duel, setting up positioning. And I don't know if Twistzz knows how to do that, and I don't know if Twistzz wants to know how to do that. So, and it might also throw up Nexa too, because I think Nexa's he's been an adequate IGL for what he is. I mean, obviously he's not the most tactically heavy guy. Very loose style, very free-flowing. You know, get Kenny S' opportunities, get Nico his opportunities, get Hunter his opportunities, that type of thing. And it could completely throw him off as well. So while that move does it's intriguing if you like watching people get headshots, but in reality, it's probably unlikely to happen. And it might just be too much fragging in one team. It might just come down to you need a guy that knows how to throw smokes, that knows what their role is, and that's what you want into him. And the other possible move is Nexa. Now, getting rid of Nexa, again, poses a lot of other problems because then we are right back to where we were in FaZe Clan and Mousesports, where we have all hail God Emperor Nico. He's the best rifler. He's the best IGL in the world. Except for some reason they can never win tournaments. Again, this would solve a couple of problems with the Almanac move. Is that you get to keep the guy who's more supportive. Again, says nothing about whatever everybody else is going to do. I threw it in there as a possible move. I don't think that this would be a good idea. I don't think that you should let Nico IGL. Sometimes for the simple matter of you need to save somebody from themselves. And that's what I'm saying, Nico, you shouldn't be an IGL ever. So, possible move, but I would pray that that doesn't happen. Finally, the last team I want to talk about is GenG. GenG are kind of a wild card here because it seems right now like there isn't really a lot of consensus over who they are. Obviously, past few months, they lost Daps, they lost Sam. So now their kind of entire roster is in jeopardy, and there's even been reports that they're letting all their players walk. Is Kusta, Bentat, Automatic, you guys can seek offers from other teams. So my question with this is, if Twistzz was going to join GenG, does that mean GenG is staying in Counter-Strike? Does that mean that they're going to build around Twistzz? Do they even want to pick up a guy like Twistzz? Do they want to leave Counter-Strike in general? Do they want to go to a mixed team? It's just, I have this on here because it is something that I think Twistzz himself should even consider. But I'm just not sure if it's best for all parties. And I'm not even sure GenG know what they want. Obviously, if we assume that the Twistzz to GenG move could happen, let's imagine a hypothetical world where it does happen. It doesn't have to be the real world, but we can still assume that it is. Twistzz is a foundational piece. Now, while it's true, doesn't have any IGLing experience, there is going to be that problem in GenG no matter what happens. This is the guy that you could build a team around. But Twistzz is a foundational piece, especially in the North American region. He's a household name. He's a guy that you can market. I'm sure he already has a built-in fan base that you can levy. And so basically he can kill it inside of the server and outside of the server as well. He's a guy that any org should want on their team. The only other issue, flying the ointment as it were, with GenG, the current rumor about GenG is that they're looking to get kind of the remnants of MIBR, the pieces that were left over. Because in the absence of Twistzz and Liquid, the rumor that was even in that article I brought up earlier is that Fallen would be joining Team Liquid in his place. I'll get to that in a different video. And GenG was looking to pick up those Brazilians and kind of build a team around them. So if GenG is looking to go the Brazilian roster way, Twistzz probably not a great pickup. I mean, we know that some of these guys can speak English. I mean, Taco's literally worked with Twistzz before, so that would at least be a starting point. But I get the feeling that if you got these Brazilian guys, you'd probably want to go to an all-Brazilian roster. But then again, maybe you pick one or two guys that you like from those remnants. Maybe if you just wanted to get Taco. I mean, really, for lack of an IGL, if you just had Automatic, Kusta, Bentet, Twistzz, Taco, I could see that lineup doing something. It's maybe not a top 10 lineup in the world, but I think it could be right outside. But then again, hey, you get a couple lucky breaks, the team gels better than it should. Maybe Kusta becomes an IGL and redefines his game. Maybe Automatic can become an IGL and redefine his game around that. Who knows what could happen with that team? They certainly got the firepower at that point to be a good team. So that's my thoughts on GenG. I don't think that's likely. I'm not sure what GenG wants to do. I'm not sure what they want to do, but it is a possibility. And if maybe Twistzz decides he wants to stay in the United States, in North America, would be his best bet.